The notion of cleanliness is not fixed. It changes across places, periods, social classes, and cultural norms. What is considered dirty or clean today was not necessarily perceived the same way in the past. How have perceptions of the body, cleanliness, and dirt evolved over time? And what can works of art tell us about the history of hygiene in the Western world? This is what we are going to explore in this video. Cleaning behaviors are not uniquely human. They exist across the animal kingdom and can be seen as a basic biological constant. In that sense, hygiene has always existed in one form or another. We even find early evidence of it in Neolithic burials, where combs were already used as personal care tools. The first traces of soap go back to ancient Mesopotamia, around 4,500 years ago, where early soap-like mixtures were already being produced. In the earliest societies, hygiene was not a distinct concept, but part of broader concerns about survival, ritual purity, and health. In ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, water already played a role in bodily cleansing, but often in a symbolic or religious framework rather than a medical one. In ancient Egypt, for example, washing and hair removal were associated with priestly purity and preparation for contact with the divine. At the same time, early medical traditions, such as those later developed in ancient Greece, began to connect cleanliness with bodily balance and health, but without the modern idea of systematic hygiene. Indeed, in Greco-Roman antiquity, bathing was closely linked to public life, especially through bathhouses that combined cleanliness with social interaction. Since these ancient times, in art too, rituals of cleanliness, as well as the spaces and gestures associated with washing the body, have long interested artists, offering an original way to explore the human body, its relationship to nudity, and broader questions of health and hygiene. After the fall of the Roman Empire, there was initially a continuity of bathing practices inherited from late antiquity in former Roman territories. Public baths and bathing facilities still existed in some regions in the early Middle Ages. Charlemagne and his court even frequented thermal sites, especially Aachen, known for its hot springs. Monasteries also followed codified forms of hygiene, including washing and bodily care within specific religious rules. However, in the following centuries, many of these infrastructures declined in Western Europe, and bathing became less central in everyday life. This was partly because the Church promoted modesty and restraint, especially regarding mixed bathing, and criticized certain moral aspects of public baths such as mixed gender use, sexuality, and social disorder, as well as broader medical and environmental concerns. Yet, it did not condemn bathing in general. However, the myth that medieval people never washed themselves is false. Public bathhouses existed in many European cities, and health manuals regularly recommended washing the body. Soap-like substances already existed, although their use varied according to region and social class. Wealthier individuals sometimes used scented soaps and aromatic waters. Clean clothing was often considered just as important as washing the body. Changing one's linen regularly was a recognized way of maintaining cleanliness. Hygiene was often understood through a medical framework based on the theory of the four humors, where health depended on balance within the body. Religious interpretations also influenced bodily care, sometimes encouraging modesty and restraint around nudity and bathing. In medieval visual culture, bathing frequently appeared in religious scenes and courtly literature. Secular romances often depicted it as an intimate or chivalric setting, such as Lancelot rescuing a lady from her bath or Tristan being tended to in his tub. These representations, found across tapestries and manuscript illuminations, show that bathing held a prominent place in the medieval imagination, serving as a backdrop for both spiritual narratives and aristocratic legends. In parallel with bodily hygiene, domestic and public hygiene developed. Floors and houses were regularly cleaned, and both public and private latrines existed. Although waste management remained highly imperfect, with people still throwing waste into the streets or emptying chamber pots out of windows, medieval towns increasingly attempted to regulate and control these practices. While people back then didn't understand germs, they followed the miasma theory, the belief that diseases were spread through toxic, foul-smelling air. To them, dirt, stagnant water, and bad odors were direct threats to health. This is why, when the Black Death struck, several European cities introduced quarantine measures, isolation hospitals, and public health regulations. These practices marked the beginnings of modern public health. From the Renaissance and throughout the 17th century, water, and especially extended hot water bathing, was often viewed as dangerous in certain regions of Europe. Many believed that it opened the pores of the skin, allowing disease, impurities, and corrupted air to enter the body. Fear of contagion played a major role in the decline of public baths, which were increasingly blamed for spreading diseases such as plague and syphilis. Instead of bathing, people increasingly practiced what became known as dry washing. The body was cleaned by rubbing it with a white cloth soaked in vinegar or scented alcohol. Perfume became a major alternative to water, especially at the French court, where strong smells were interpreted as protective against miasmas. Even house design evolved accordingly, and some writers considered bathrooms unnecessary thanks to the use of body linen. Bathing did not disappear entirely. It survived mainly as a therapeutic practice in spa towns and thermal resorts, but cleanliness became more closely associated with linen than with the body itself. Being clean meant wearing white garments and underclothes that were changed frequently. And so, quite naturally, the whiteness of linen had become a powerful marker of social status and respectability. King Louis XIV reportedly changed his clothes several times throughout the day to project impeccable cleanliness through his garments. Although the king owned a bathtub at Versailles, he was known to use it primarily for medical purposes. In art, hygiene was rarely represented through bathing in the modern sense. Instead, it appeared in more indirect ways. Portraits often emphasized the dazzling whiteness of linen collars, ruffs, cuffs, shirts, and veils. At the same time, artistic cycles devoted to Susanna, Bathsheba, Diana, Venus, and other female toilette scenes flourished between the 16th and 19th centuries. These works depict women before a mirror, arranging their hair, applying perfumes, or using cosmetics. From around 1750, Europe gradually began to rediscover the benefits of water, and bathing slowly returned as a hygiene practice, mainly among the upper classes. Medicine recommended washing the intimate parts of the body that were prone to sweat and unpleasant odors. The ointments and powders used in previous centuries were increasingly questioned. They were considered too heavily perfumed, causing headaches, hair loss, and skin breakouts. New medical discoveries highlighted the benefits of hot water, and after several centuries of mistrust, water was increasingly considered safe. However, bathing remained highly regulated and far from modern immersion. People used portable tubs, often made of copper, placed in rooms and filled manually. At court, especially in France under Louis XV, dedicated bathing spaces appeared at Versailles, showing that bathing was becoming more organized and recognized. Hydrotherapy, or mineral water treatments, became a major social phenomenon in Europe, combining medicine, leisure, and sociability, with places like Bath in England and Spa in Belgium. In aristocratic homes, it remained a carefully managed ritual focused on comfort, privacy, and appearance. Bathtubs were often lined with fabric and used with accessories to improve comfort. The body was usually kept partially covered, reflecting strong concerns about modesty. Marie Antoinette, for example, used a mobile bathtub placed in her room when needed. Bathwater was sometimes scented, linking bathing to luxury as much as hygiene. For most people, however, the situation was very different. Among lower classes, regular bathing was rare due to lack of water access, cost, and infrastructure. Hygiene relied mainly on washing visible parts of the body and frequently changing linen. Cleanliness was therefore more about appearance than full-body washing. By the late 18th century, bathing began to spread more widely, but it remained largely limited to elites. It also became increasingly associated not only with hygiene, but with rest, comfort, and well-being. During the 19th century, hygiene became a massive social priority in Europe, driven by scientific progress, urbanization, and hygienist ideas. The Industrial Revolution had crammed millions into filthy, overcrowded cities, making deadly outbreaks inevitable. In 1832, a devastating cholera epidemic swept through cities like Paris and London, killing tens of thousands and exposing the horrific sanitary conditions of the poor. This shock launched the Hygienist movement. In the 1850s and 60s, long before anyone knew what a bacterium was, authorities built massive sewer systems to flush away the foul air and stagnant water they blamed for the disease. It was only by the end of the century that the breakthroughs of Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch established the germ theory. Suddenly, dirt and disease were no longer just about bad smells. They became invisible, microscopic enemies, transforming sanitation into a precise scientific weapon. It was then that early public hygiene campaigns began targeting schools, promoting hand washing and regular medical inspections of children. However, hygiene development was uneven across social classes. Working-class households often had limited access to clean water and sanitation. Bathing was rare and usually replaced by partial washing with basins, cloths, or sponges, often in kitchens or bedrooms. Water had to be carried manually, making full-body washing difficult. By contrast, bourgeois homes gradually introduced more structured hygiene spaces. Bathrooms and dedicated washing rooms appeared, and bathtubs became common household objects, although still costly and not yet widespread. By the end of the century, running water and indoor bathrooms began to appear in upper-class households, but remained limited. Full domestic bathrooms only became common in the 20th century. To address the poor sanitary conditions of the working class, authorities developed public baths and municipal washhouses to improve hygiene for poorer populations. Hygiene also became a public and political issue, highlighted, for example, at the 1889 Paris Universal Exhibition. Cultural exchanges linked to colonial expansion also shaped hygiene practices. European powers exported their sanitation models to colonized regions, mainly in urban centers and among local elites, where Western hygiene was associated with modernity and control. Meanwhile, European artists became increasingly interested in non-European bathing cultures through Orientalism and Japonism. Traditions such as Ottoman hammams, Indian ritual baths, and Japanese bathing practices were often depicted in art, but through idealized or exoticized perspectives influenced by Western imagination. During the 20th century, hygiene became fully integrated into daily life in much of the Western world, driven by urban infrastructure, public health policies, and technological progress, such as running water, sewage systems, and indoor plumbing. In the first half of the century, access remained uneven, especially in working-class urban housing, where private bathrooms were still not universal and shared facilities were common. After the Second World War, reconstruction and economic growth led to the rapid spread of indoor bathrooms, first in Europe and North America, and later in many other industrialized regions. The bathroom became a standard feature of housing, and bathing shifted from an occasional or practical act to a routine part of daily life. At the same time, hygiene became closely tied to comfort, privacy, and personal well-being. It was no longer mainly a marker of social distinction, but part of everyday domestic routine. The rise of consumer society reshaped hygiene through advertising and mass production. Soaps, shampoos, and beauty products were increasingly marketed as essential daily goods, helping to standardize new norms of cleanliness worldwide. The idea of washing every day has been largely influenced by public health policies, but also by marketing and advertising. By the late 20th century, daily washing or showering had become the dominant norm in most industrialized societies. Art and visual culture also played a role in documenting these changes. Paintings, photography, and later mass media often depict everyday domestic interiors, including modest or working-class homes, offering stylized but revealing images of popular living conditions and hygiene practices. Today, hygiene is widely established across much of the world, but access to clean water and sanitation remains unequal between regions and social groups. Daily routines such as showering, skincare, and cosmetic use are strongly shaped by global consumer culture and digital media. At the same time, environmental concerns are reshaping habits, with growing attention to water use, packaging, and more sustainable products, while visual culture, especially advertising and social media, continues to influence standards of cleanliness and the body by promoting highly standardized images of hygiene. Contemporary artists are increasingly exploring the limits of hygiene by representing either extreme cleanliness, extreme dirtiness, or how materials associated with cleanliness, such as soap, can retain traces and challenge the idea of pure removal. Hygiene never followed a simple straight line from dirty to clean. It kept changing its logic, from water to linen, from appearance to health, from health to comfort, and now to consumption and environmental impact. What stays constant is not the practice itself, but the way societies decide what the body should look like, feel like, and signal to others. If you enjoyed this video, you can find more on the channel. So if you'd like to see more, consider subscribing. Thanks for watching.